Action. Go.
Due to the recent presidential election, many Americans are concerned about the social welfare of our citizens. As such, I will be recapping a brief history of social welfare in the United States. Our history begins with the Great Depression, in which the United States government decided that we needed to mitigate the mass suffering of the people, so we instilled many Social Security programs with the New Deal. The Social Security Act was officially passed in 1935 in August by President Roosevelt. In the same year, the Health, Education, and Welfare Act was passed. The Social Security Act still continues. In 1953, the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare was established on April 11th. And in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed, in which minorities had experienced changes in institutional health care, employment opportunities, etc. While they still weren't equal, their situation did eventually improve with the installment of the Civil Rights Act and ongoing of the 60s and 70s. In 1965, the first major infusion of federal funding into the education system was implemented by the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which would be kind of revamped in the 1990s, which I will talk about soon. In 1972, the Equal Employment Opportunity Act was passed, in which equal employment opportunities for people of differing genders, races, and religion was passed. Not that it exists currently. In 1986, the Immigration Reform Control Act granted temporary resident status for undocumented workers who had worked in the United States prior to 1982. And finally, in 1994, in the Improving American Schools Act under President Clinton, reauthorized the Elementary and Secondary Education Act for the next 5 years, as talked about previously.
Now let's take a second to talk about our defense policy. Prior to 1939, America was an isolationist country, but 1941, when America became involved in World War II after Pearl Harbor, we stopped being isolationist due to ineffectiveness and became internationalist. Flash forward to 1947, when the Truman Doctrine was amended, which contained the spread of communism throughout the U.S. Additionally, Truman changed the title of head of the War Department to the head of Defense Department, and changed the head of the Defense Department's title to Secretary of Defense. Further along the road, in 1973, federal law was changed, and the War Powers Act was enacted, intending to check the president's power to commit United States to armed conflict without consent of the Congress. Since Nixon's presidency, not all of the presidents have stuck to committing to this law as they think